The radio name Q101 has been around since the early 80s, but it didn't become something truly meaningful in Chicago until the early 90s when the radio station switched to the alternative music format. Full disclosure, I was there from 1993 to 2000 in my first go-around at Q101. Now, in the 21st century, Q101's had an interesting, kind of confusing journey. It was sold, the frequency was put, or the brand was put on a suburban frequency. There was an operation playing Q101 adjacent alternative pop music on the WKQX call letters, and then through some financial and legal maneuvering, Q101 returned to 101.1 FM a few years ago. Now here's the thing. The station in its present form sounds like Q101. It has a focus on artists in and out of the studio, and it's definitely more community building in its focus and approach. This is Car Con Carne episode 1011. If you say it digit by digit, it's 1011, which maps to Q101's frequency. Seems like an appropriate time to bring Q101's program director, James Kurdziel, into the car. Kurdziel? I need to ask him that. In any event, this is an unscripted interview, but as a disclaimer, Car Con Carne is a Q101 podcast. But first, Car Con Carne is presented by Easy Automation, easy-automation.net. Transform your living space with cutting-edge home automation. Experience seamless control over audio, video, lighting, climate, security, and more. Embrace the future of smart living. It's your home, your rules. Get a quote, hassle-free, by visiting easy-automation.net or give my guy Dan a call, 630-730-3728. Pick up the phone, call my guy Dan and say, you know what, it's holiday season, Dan. It's time to turn my home into a smart home. Help me, Dan, and Dan will help. That's what he does. He's my guy, Dan.
It's Car Con Carne. Let's meet in the car. It's Car Con Carne. And now here's the star of our show, James Van Alstyne.
All right, so we're meeting underneath NBC Tower.
Yes.
It's kind of sketchy.
It's sketchy, yeah.
But that's part of the Chicago charm.
Right. I found that from the second of moving here, that it's the underneath the streets is where you really want to be and also not be. This is James Kurdziel, program director of Q101. It's funny, I was in this building, the NBC Tower, probably 7 years ago. All the water in my house stopped working, and I needed to take my son somewhere just to use the bathroom, wash his hands. So we came downtown and used the facility at the NBC Tower. This is like 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. I thought afterward, for fun, let's just drive around a little bit downtown. Ended up on Lower Wacker, where if you've ever taken a wrong turn on Lower Wacker at the wrong time, it's the Fast and Furious down there. And that's where all the towed cars are, right?
All the towed cars, but like full-on drag racing, like girls in bikinis with flags, that kind of shit going on.
I love it.
And as I artfully extracted us from there, my son turned to me and said, is this one of those things we don't tell mom about? It is one of those things we don't tell mom about.
Well, that's a cool thing because I didn't know that. And that's my experience in Chicago so far has been the realization that I could do something different every single day and in a year not come close to finding all the things that there are to do in Chicago.
So how long ago did you come to Chicago? I feel like you've been here forever already, but I know that's not true.
It's a little over a year, actually.
No, it seems like it's been longer.
Yeah, it really sort of, I guess, technically last July, but I was doing it from a different city for a while.
Okay.
Because I was living in Minneapolis, and then I moved here by October, like end of October, early November is when I was officially living here. But I had been coming here, for years and years. It's, obviously my favorite city. And to get to work here now is just mind-blowing.
So you get the opportunity, you get the nod, like, hey, we need someone to take over Q101. What was your first thought?
Terrified. It's, in meeting you, right, it's one of the first things I said to you is, like, it's funny because I've known who you are for a really long time, and it's because I'm a radio geek. I'm somebody who came up in radio only wanting to do radio and really loving alternative radio. Mm-hmm. So where I grew up in Buffalo, where we had a pretty big alternative station,
sure.
you know what Q101 is. So as I famously said, the first station I ever listened to on the internet was Q101 when I was younger. So coming here, it just was never lost on me how big of a deal it is, and how important it is. And I wish I could say that I knew all along that I was going to fit right in and be able to knock it out of the park, but I didn't know that. It's a really intimidating place. It's full of really talented people, and my first thought was just fear. Like I didn't want to mess it up. I didn't want to hurt what was happening. It's important to the cultural fabric of Chicago, and that wasn't lost on me either. And the more I kept realizing these things, you sort of think about them that anyone else might just see them as feathers, right? Like, this is such a great thing. It just kept scaring me more and more. You know, I just kept getting more and more afraid of like, oh no, I really am responsible for something vastly important. And obviously over the years, it's become bigger than just a radio station. It's events, it's, you know, it's community outreach. It's a lot of things. So once I got past the fear, then it became understanding how cool the opportunity was.
You may be the first program director I've ever met with humility.
Oh, yeah.
It's a watershed moment.
Thanks.
So I want to get into a lot of the stuff you just brought up. I want to get the big one out of the way. Broadcast radio, terrestrial radio, is having a moment. Concerning moment, challenging, some might say existential. What's your take on the path forward for terrestrial radio?
You know, you think about a station like Q101 or any station in Chicago, New York, LA, maybe any of the top 25 cities in the United States. I don't know that you'll feel the moment like a lot of much smaller places will. Because places like places like Chicago, obviously the revenue's there, and it's important to stay local. It's important to stay live because that's how the money's made. So it'll be a long time before anything's really felt in these cities. But what you see happening in much, much smaller markets where the locality is being taken away, they're feeling it immediately. And now you've got companies, the bigger companies even, trying to walk that back a little bit because it's like, oh man, maybe we can't afford to be live anymore, but we do have to be local. And they're trying to fix that a little bit because, you know, they sort of overdid it a little bit. As far as radio overall, you know, on one hand, you go, there's a too big to fail component to it where there's so many people that still use this medium. You could chop it in half tomorrow and still be hitting 125 million Americans every week. You know, what we don't have is many people loving it the way that they used to. We don't have those really passionate radio listeners, the people that would sit in a bar and argue about their favorite morning shows and things like that. That's what we've got to really fight to preserve and really even grow again, which I do think is possible. So I just don't think it's possible by just focusing on your antenna and the signal in the car. You've got to be a far-reaching local brand. With Q, we've put so much focus on our YouTube channel, and now we're at the point where, and you know Zach, Zach, who I work with, our meetings, our conceptual meetings are as much about YouTube as they are on the air. You know, everything that we do, our ideas of performances in our lounge or concerts. What can we do digitally with this? What can we do? You know, how can we redevelop the back end of our app so that you can get exclusive content just in this app? You know, one of the things that we wanted to do, the tech didn't catch up with us this year, but it will next year, which is we're going to announce Twisted next year via the app a day before anyone sees it or hears of it anywhere else. And it'll just be a simple subscription kind of thing. And, you know, and it's about just being open to those things. I think that a lot of people who do what I do are afraid. And it's just, well, no, or, you know, they convince themselves that radio is still bigger than it is, because they're afraid to go to the future of what it still can be.
There needs to be some courageous moves made.
Right.
As you talk about live and local, I mean, we live in a world where the news cycle changes every 60 seconds. I feel like radio stations are in peril if they can't respond to all the shit that is tumbling in 24 hours a day.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, I think you especially see that with news. You've got major national or even local news happening on a weekend, and you've got radio stations without bodies there ready to deliver information. And when that Trump thing happened this summer, I was in a bunch of Ubers that weekend because I was just bumping around town, and all of these Ubers had the radio on, right? And they're all listening for as much news as they can, but very few actually had up-to-date live cut-in stuff from that locally because they just didn't really have it, they didn't have the bodies. So now it becomes what can those bodies do? Like it's you can't have somebody sitting in a room waiting for news to happen. I understand that, but if you have those people sitting back going, I can be doing all this digital stuff, we can be doing adding to our app, putting stuff there, that there's real opportunity in that.
Let's talk about Q101 in the present day. Now, back when I was at Q101 circa 90s and early aughts, the idea of a heritage radio station was kind of a negative one. Yeah. XRT was the outlier in Chicago, but heritage wasn't necessarily a good thing back then. But it certainly seems like, effectively so, you've leaned into Q101's heritage and brand in this market.
Yeah.
Are the rules different now?
Yeah. I mean, and you touched on it, which is alternative radio. I don't think it's exclusive to Q101. Alternative radio, through some accident of time, has succeeded, and these stations have stayed around and through no fault of their own have gained heritage. At the same time, the average age of listeners has grown, and that's just, and by the way, it's not that kids are unwilling to listen to the radio. It's just we don't give them any credit. We don't do anything for kids to draw them to radio. We wait for them, and maybe that is the right strategy for right now. I know kids that are, when it was our age, I was 12 by the time I had a favorite radio station. Now they're 22 before they're even flipping around a dial, 28 before they have habits, and at least statistically. So you're really talking about getting people to really consume your brand by the time they're in their 30s. What you have with Q101 is people who remember it, and there's a huge opportunity in that we try to take advantage of, because oh boy, sorry about that. Q101 broke a lot of these bands, and alternative radio, when it was breaking all of these bands, it was just on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. Well, as the volume of new music and the quality of new music has been harder to find, I don't want to say it's not there. It is there. It's just not being fed to us as easily as it was. You go back and you go, well, we did all of this. Why not reintroduce that? It's Q101 is one of the very first stations to play Third Eye Blind. Why aren't we doing that? So you do dig deeper into that sort of stuff, and you rely on, hey, look, we're the Q101 you remember. We also do cool shit now.
For sure.
And it's like, so trying to balance the two and get the people.
You're doing shit now that Q101 should have been doing all along. The stuff that made the station a thing in Chicago. The pop-ups, that exclusive contact with big-name artists, that's all very much in Q101's DNA.
Yeah. I'll tell you exactly how I accomplished that. Letting people do their jobs. There's people in that building that are just so good, and it's like all I've had to do is let their voices be heard. That's it. That's it's like they're so connected. They know exactly who to talk to in the city to make some of these things happen. They know exactly who to talk to. They make it really easy for me to get on the label side and use those contacts. And it makes it fun, first of all, but also it's just like, man, these are people with institutional knowledge, and they're incredibly talented people, and I just have to watch them work.
You mentioned labels, you mentioned sourcing music. The age-old question from listeners, where does music come from? how does a song get on the radio? Now, back in the day, I mean, I'm going to be that guy. It was easier to spike in a local song every now and then and try to break an artist. Does that still happen?
Well, it does here, and I think that's something that we're lucky to be in Chicago. I'll give a lot of credit to XRT for this, because Laura, who programs that station, she hunts for bands from Chicago. And when I got here, I really admired it, and I thought, what's our version of that? You know, how do we also go hunting for local music? And then Sincere Engineer came onto my radar, and you know, no major label brought them to me. Nobody was working me on the record, to use the industry term. It was just people. It was people telling me about them. It was Lauren O'Neill going, "Hey, there's this band from here, by the way. We've never paid attention, but honestly, we should." And I started listening to them, and I thought, well, I'm not going to put this on a weekend. I'm not going to put this over. Like let's invest in this band, and I think that's paid off. But then a funny thing happened. You started seeing bands like Bridget Calls Me Baby and Frico also start to, we didn't develop them. They were doing their own thing, and we were able to help them hit another level and things like that. And that's another thing where XRT and Q101, you just start playing nice, where it's like neither one of us is looking to shut the other out.
Right.
It's about, you get this thing with them, then we get this thing with them, and then the band elevates. Well, now you get this other thing with them, then we get this thing with them, then the band elevates more. And Laura from XRT and I talk a lot, and it's like we both share an all boats rise mentality.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That it's a cliche, but that's exactly what that is.
And and we danced around this a little bit earlier, but that's a radio thing right now. Like, none of us can afford to be the one to try to put someone else out of business. Right. It's like this medium isn't doing that. The strength of this medium is that it still touches a lot of people. So if you can all of us get together and promote the strengths of what we do as individual brands, but also elevate one another, that's good for all of us. Then everybody's got ratings, then everybody's got streams, then everybody's making money. And that's a good place to be.
I love that. I remember when I did Local 101 on Q101, there was a local show on XRT. Richard Milne did a show called Local Anesthetic. On Rock 103.5, it was Chris Payne doing Chicago Rocks. We would communicate all the time. Like, I would get music at Q101 that was way too metal to put on Q101, and I'd send it Payne's way. Or I'd get something Americana or folksy. I'd say, "Hey, Richard, you should check them out." And they would send me, "Oh, this stuff is really indie and weird and fucked up. You'd probably play that on Q101. Yes.
Yeah.
But you got to do that.
Right.
I mean, I think of a modern-day comparison, the craft brewing business. They all technically compete on paper, but they share institutional knowledge. They share ingredients as needed. Like they collaborate to succeed together.
What I think you have with Q101 now, and again, it's a product of a lot of people. It's not just me, but it's what XRT has always had, which is you listen to XRT and you will not find anything like it in the United States. It is very, even the national stuff they play, the stuff that they play it in between, the stuff that they play in a different quarter hour, whatever, you won't find anything like that anywhere else. I don't think you'll find an alternative station that sounds like Q101 anywhere, because we get into the Chicago history, because we try to find newer Chicago bands to support, but also, again, it's people like you who have this history in this market of like, look, there's these national bands that maybe people forgot about over the years, but they've always been important to Q101 because Q101 was always a part of their story. And a lot of that too, it's like, it's one of those things where my job in it just becomes to stay reverent. It becomes to listen to these bands as they come through, talk about how impactful Q101 has been since the start of their career. And there's a common theme with bands that do that. It's the Linkin Parks of the world. I always find that it's bands that continually find success, that never forget what got them there in the first place, and continue to feed that. It's, we just did a big thing with 21 Pilots where they played in our lounge. They don't do that kind of thing,
right.
But they know that Q101 still drive streams for them. Q101 airplay still matters for their streams in Chicago, and they can't do it without us. There's other bands that can do it with us and with XRT, and there's other heritage bands that can do it with us and CHI even, but there's certain bands where it's like, Q101 is the most important thing, and if they don't get Q101, then they don't get all these other radio stations nationally. And it's another thing where, like, look, we're all realistic about where the business is and the opportunities that are ahead of it still, but the challenges are what they are. But we still drive streams for these bands. Like we're still the thing. A guy that I know at a label said this really great thing that I parrot quite a bit, which is you can be successful on your own, but you can't be famous without radio. And that resonated with me, because it's been true, and it's that part I still believe in.
I think about those heritage acts that still are reverent to their past and their ties with Q101. I feel like the Offspring, if they wanted to, could probably have an office at Q101. Yeah. We're recording this before the Twisted shows at the Aragon Ballroom. Bush, Gavin Rossdale, has been so much a part of the radio station since 1994.
Yeah, and he's one where we booked that show. His manager is one of the nicest human beings that I've ever met. I've known him before my time here, but when we booked everything, you know how this works. We present to bands like, we would like you to do this, we would like you to do this, we would like you to do this. Gavin Rossdale is calling us going, hey, how about I come on tomorrow? How about I do this? Like he knows the hotline number, and Billy Corgan's not much different. He's a guy who is
he was not like that in the 90s. I want to be clear.
No.
He's we had no access to the Pumpkins in the 90s.
Oh, he's great. Their team, a lot of that is that too, but he commits to doing a thing for 10 minutes with us, and 2 hours later he's still there, and I think a lot of that kind of stuff comes from major market talent and delivering. It's you get somebody in the room and maybe their expectations are low, and then you put them in front of somebody like Brian Haddad or Brian and Kenzie or that whole show, and they're blown away by the experience that they're having, that time flies when you're having fun, right? But also they just go like, this is so much better than I thought it was going to be, and I'm having a great time. I'll stay. And then also it becomes, once they do leave, it's like, you know what? You paid that off for me, so I will be back. And we've benefited from that with Billy.
You mentioned Brian Haddad. Is he forbidden to ever be sludge again?
No. In fact, we fight about that a lot. I shouldn't say fight, because he's the nicest human being on earth. I actually thought, it's like, I get why you got away from sludge, but the reality is people still say, hey, sludge, So the median that we've settled on for now is he doesn't run away from it. He doesn't promote it, but he doesn't hide from it either. So when people say sludge, he doesn't correct them, it's one of those things where, like how we started this conversation, where I knew a lot about that Q101 and I knew who sludge was, and I got here, and by that time I had known Brian, just because of, working in the same company over the years. But like, I'm like, oh, that's sludge. That's, I'm sure he keeps calling himself Brian, but that's sludge, and it's like, I hope that when he thinks about it, that he's just thinking about the name, because the era, the sludge era, gosh, man, he has a lot to be proud of with that stuff.
100%.
So I wouldn't be opposed to it.
As we're talking about Twisted and events, I mean, the big radio shows were always a thing, dating back to the 90s through the 21st century. It feels like that eats up so much of your job as a program director. Is that accurate?
It's a separate job. It's a big job. It's harder than ever, as you can imagine, to do it. And it's not harder than ever in the sense that bands don't want to do it. It's not that. They do want to do it. But there's fewer stations doing them across the country.
So bands can't route a tour.
Routing has become really difficult. It still happens because we're Chicago, so they'll start from us. So, but we're lucky enough to have friends in Milwaukee that still do shows, and friends in St. Louis that still do shows, and friends in Minneapolis that still do shows. That helps the routing. But, when there's big giant shows in Florida that have gone away, And that's a problem because those shows used to route to New Orleans and Kansas City. And now, as a result, those have gone away. The West Coast has always been sort of its own animal, but now you've got 2 alternative stations in LA, both of them trying to do Christmas or winter shows, and neither of them doing summer shows. You know, it would be great for us if one would do one and one would do the other, because then routing would always work. But now they're trying to feed up to, you know, now Live 105's back in San Francisco, right? And they're trying to get back into the show game. Well, the routing wasn't there, so it was hard for them to make it happen. And they were even trying to add Seattle to that. So, you know, then Denver's in play and things like that. But with a lot of these markets, and I would say especially mid-sized markets getting out of the game, it's actually made it tougher to do for major markets.
That makes sense. Now, as a former Q101 DJ, current listener, what makes a good on-air personality? I know the rules have changed since I was doing the Top 9 at 9 a million years ago. A lot of it has been driven, I think, by the ratings measurement system, PPM, having to really make tight, concise breaks. What makes good talent in 2024, 2025?
So I break all of those rules, and I think it's because PPM has evolved. But also, I think it's because I come from diary markets and I loved working in diary markets because it rewarded getting attention. And it meant...
And to explain, the diary listeners, as the rating service, they would recall what they listened to and write down when they listened to it, and that's how the ratings were determined.
Right.
Those submissions were projected on the population writ large.
Yep, and what people would effectively do is vote. You know, it's whatever they were actually listening to, they wrote down what they remembered. And that meant the strategy was be memorable, which meant you outrageous morning shows who, you know, do whatever you have to do to get attention. We're going to put up a bunch of like really edgy billboards and things like that. And, you know, and then the people meter, which measures literal listening. That changed a lot of things, and again, it made, you know, be concise, don't brand the station all the time, you know, but even that's evolved too. Now branding is back. Now even meters will sort of reward you for getting attention for yourself a little bit, as long as it's entertaining enough. But what I've done with talent now, it's all about authenticity. And I guess that's probably more of a question for you, which is like, when I started, we were probably taught differently, weren't we? Like it's you know, have a persona, you know, be this or be the blank guy, be the, you know, for me it was always be the funny guy, funny guy, and it's like, and I don't think that exists anymore. No, I don't think so. It's about be who you are, be a person. Well, and I think that is definitely the era we're in. I mean, we're in an era of podcasting where authenticity is certainly rewarded. But yeah, I remember back in the day at Q101, I said to the program director at the time, Dave Richards, who's gone on to become a big deal on the West Coast, I said, you know, I think, this is when I was doing nights at Q101, I think I might want to get rid of the local show. It's getting too hard to do that at my nightly show. And he said, you need to keep doing that. He said, to be identifiable with something on the air is something a lot of people don't get to. He's like, I'm not going to let you get rid of that. And it was the best advice I was ever given. Yeah. That worked out. that worked out. But I mean, to your point, like, I was the local guy. Yeah. And in the moment, I'm like, well, I'm not being competitive with the rest of the air staff, but I was. Right. I was creating my own brand back then, and I just didn't have, I couldn't see the forest for the trees. Yeah. But you know, right now we have Brian Phillips, who you would say, you know, you're the musicologist. You're the musicologist. Mm-hmm. But that's who he is as a person. You know, you sit down with him, and that conversation, whether you want it to or not, is going to be about music. And it becomes, when you think of him as talent, you go, okay, so that is who you are anyway. All I have to do with you is work with you on mechanics, or tell you like, hey, look, there's audience availability in the 6 p.m. hour that we weren't getting. So let's put a history of alternative feature there. Which I love hearing in Afternoon Drive. It's great. 2 songs, deep pulls, very going against the radio rule book, playing shit that's not tried and tested. Yep. Love that. And I am proud to say it's working. Good. It should be. Yeah, we've added a couple SharePoints, which is ratings, and you know, and normal world.
People like to be surprised. People like those pattern breaks.
Yeah.
You get your medicine by coming to Q101. You get the big hits, but people like to be taken off course.
Right. You know, an exception to all of it, I think, is probably Lauren O'Neill, in that Lauren's, you know, which thing is she, the local whatever, you know, Lauren is Q101, and it's an overarching persona that she has, which is just, she is synonymous with this brand now. You know, she doesn't have to have a one thing, because all the things filter back through her. So where everyone else, it's like, you know, look, here's this thing about your personality. Again, you be your authentic self. We'll teach you how to use that in the mechanics in presenting that. But with her, it's just whatever you are, it's going to be what Q101 is known for. Now, that's a responsibility on her, you know, and she's aware of it, which is like, everything that you say and do doesn't apply to just you. It applies to the entirety of the brand, because people relate you to that brand entirely, you know.
I think one of her great strengths, if not her greatest strength, is her digital presence.
Yeah.
Sure, great on the air, but I think her digital persona is so helpful to lifting the brand up overall.
She's you know, in an era of making those personal connections, she does it better than anybody, and she does it digitally, and she's, you know, you ever watch one of her videos and not want to hang out with her? You know, like, she's the most fun person in every room she's in. She is one of the most compassionate human beings I've ever been around. So she's the type of person that when you meet her in person and she's asking about how you're doing, she's waiting for you to tell her, and she cares, you know. And that comes across on the air too. That comes across in the videos that she does. But ultimately, it's like, that's who she is as a person. So, you know, a lot of stations and a lot of markets aren't as lucky as we are to have something like that. But so that's why we, you know, sometimes Lauren will go like, oh, I feel like I might be on the socials too much. And it's like, oh, I promise, I promise you are not.
Don't pump the brakes. You're good.
Yeah, the more the merrier. I promise. There's no such thing as too much. I promise.
Going back to that authenticity, I was at picnic at the Taste of Randolph this year. I'm backstage. I see Lauren walking by with a bottle of Malort. I'm like, where are you going? She's like, I'm going to give this to Local H. Cool. Of course. Functioning as advertised.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's been a year, James Kurdziel, program director of Q101. What was your mission when you came in, and did you accomplish it, or is it in progress?
It's in progress. I hope it's never done. I also hope that it evolves. My mission, if I had to put it in one word, was relevance. It was, I want Q101 to be a relevant brand in this marketplace. And I meant that, meaning I want to go beyond radio. I want to be a heavily integrated part of Chicago. And the way to do that is to let people do it. It's to let the talent do what they do, and free them up to make mistakes, to have fun doing it, to acknowledge those mistakes, and who doesn't relate to that, right? And get better because of it, and you know, sort of create a space where people want to be. You know, alternative radio, when it started, was fortunate to capitalize on scenes, right? It was, I went to this show because I like this band. Well, I met a bunch of people that like this band, and then I went to the next show and they were all there. So now we're friends, you know. Well, that's hard to do in the digital world. I want to be the one way that you can do it. And I think we do that with our events, with our shows, with our lounges, but also just with our talent interaction. And you know, as simple as you comment on a Facebook post and talent is the one that comments back. I think that stuff's important. And so creating that vibe where talent want to be, you know, it's I want people that want to come to work. I want people that are excited about their jobs. And I always think of myself like, or people that do my job, I'm a content creator at my root just because of where I come from. I come from writing, I come from stand-up comedy, I come from a lot of that kind of stuff. But what I do now is I'm an environment creator. It's my job is not necessarily to nitpick what people are doing. it's to create a space where people are comfortable to do their best shit and have fun. And you do your best shit when you're having a good time.
For real. I remember when I came over to a radio station, this was probably 8 years ago. It was my first time having to voice track. I'd never done it before. I thought horrible things about it, and my program director at the time said, "You're going to love it. It means you'll never have a bad break. Your breaks will always be perfect." And I thought, that's not what makes it a personality. It makes a good DJ maybe, but a personality fucks up. It's about the recovery. It's about those stumbles and the authenticity.
The acknowledgement.
So you got to take chances. You got to miss.
Yeah.
In order to be memorable.
Right. Anybody who's gotten good at something could tell you that their biggest leaps forward were after significant mistakes, you know, and we can set this up for people to never screw up. We can set this up for people to never have a catastrophic error, but they'll also never get better. It'll just stagnate. And I think that probably applies to a lot of radio right now. It's stagnant is probably a good word for what a lot of it is, but like when people do stand out, you see how much they do stand out. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I think about here, I tell the people here, it's like, by the way, no one in Chicago sucks, because they're in Chicago, like this is a hard market to get to, let alone sustain.
Well, and the available jobs are shrinking. So
right.
if you made it, it's like, congratulations, you're on the varsity team.
Right. And you're really, really good. And nobody has ever gotten better by putting someone else down. No one's ever done it. That might feel better in a minute. And what I always say is like, look, you can acknowledge that people are doing great shit in Chicago radio. We're just doing a little bit better shit, sometimes we're getting wins. Sometimes we're doing I think Twisted is such a unique thing. The only thing that I wish more about it is I wish Chicago understood how unique that series is to Chicago.
Would you ever go back to one night, or is the genie out of the bottle and it always has to be a multiple night stand?
I would never say no to anything out of hand. I always just like the best idea. There may come a time where availabilities suggest that you have to do everything on one night because maybe only the bands can only do one night or whatever. I would like to keep it a series for as long as humanly possible because I think it's cool. I think it's cool to do that. Maybe I would like to see it evolve into, venue size changes per night. And, maybe we're doing one in a 150 person club, but with the biggest band,
Is it like Russian nesting dolls?
yeah, exactly. Just like bigger, open one off and then the next one, and then the next one. The guys in St. Louis do it that way. It's their shows are over the course of 2 weeks, I think, each one at a different venue, each one at a different size and scale. And I just thought that was so cool. But Chicago in Q101 partnering with the Aragon on it, so that every year in December this thing's happening at Aragon. It requires us to come through with the lineup every year. And I don't think we could really do less than 3. I think if you do 2, it's weird when you do 2. But I don't think we necessarily need to do 4. Or I think 3 might be the magic number going forward. But it really comes down to what bands are there and what they want to do. And look, if alternative becomes so mainstream again that you could take 2-3 of these bands, have them headline an arena, fill it with baby bands, and do it that way, I'd be all about that.
For sure. And you are so lucky to arrive in Chicago when you did, because they fixed the sound at the Aragon. They made it more comfortable. It was not always that way.
No?
It's a good, nice 5,000 plus room to see a show in now. It wasn't always that way.
Oh, then I am lucky because I walked in last year on the first night, and it was with the Keys. So Local H was one of the first bands that I actually saw at Twisted, and it just blew me away.
Yeah,
it was just unbelievable. And then obviously I know what they mean here, and if you have one conversation with Lauren, she will make sure you know what they mean here. And it was just awesome to see that. And I thought it sounded great. I thought it looked great. I start thinking about some of the stuff we started doing last year, which is like what are some activations that we can do with these bands at that venue that take advantage of how unique that is, that space and things like that. But, we're not married to that either.
And by activations, are these the things like play Scrabble with the band before the show, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's just that we're just trying to rethink that and trying to do better than that, a lot of times you're at the mercy of the bands themselves.
Sure.
A lot of times it's like, hey, look, this is all we have time to do. The band likes playing Scrabble, so that's what we're going to do. What we've challenged ourselves to do in our promotions team is come up with really unique things that are different, that are just different than what we've done. And maybe that is getting into the after show game, and maybe that's like, well, look, we've got AWOL Nation direct support for the Pumpkins, but I know he's here the night before. Maybe we do like a secret pop-up with him or something like that, and try to do something that just takes advantage of that. Or do something that's on their level. We always ask the bands what they want to do, because you want it to be something that's a good experience.
For sure.
It's like last year when we had Young the Giant, turns out the Young the Giant guys were like huge basketball fans. So we're like trying to put together a basketball game with Young the Giant, and things like that. But Zach, who I talked about earlier, came up with this idea to take it like make basketball cards, like trading cards for the band
awesome.
and the listeners and things like that. And then that becomes a really cool component. So trying to come up with all that stuff is always the goal.
One final thought, because I've kept you here for a while. Thanks for going all in on podcasts.
Yeah, well, thanks for picking up the phone. It's important. I think that we talked about this earlier. It's like a lot of radio is afraid to go beyond radio, and we shouldn't be. This is a
problem dating back like 20 years. Like, I can't believe you're still saying that.
Yeah, and it's still, it's the same people who, this streaming thing isn't going to last long. Don't worry about us. Keep printing CDs, you talk about not seeing the forest for the trees. I just think that, the mistake that radio made at first was we made podcasting and never took any credit for it, because all the people that we stopped listening to went to that world, and they even came back to us and said, hey, this is becoming a thing, be a part of it. And we went, nah, yeah,
we're good.
Yeah, we're good. And you come here in a place like Chicago, where again, it's just a lot of stuff you luck out by virtue of being in Chicago. And again, I'm aware of that, and I know it's not as simple in other cities to do what we're able to do here. But you've got something like Q101, which again, it's this impactful brand in this marketplace. Well, what can we do with it? And it's like, you've got someone like you who does this podcast, and it's a great podcast, and it's good, and it's like, this can be something that Q101 offers up. And this is something that like I had told you when we met, which is like, whether it be podcasting or something else, like, how do we have you in the family?
Yeah.
Like, what can we do? And fortunately it became this, right? Yeah. And then it becomes like, we have our morning show, which we obviously repurposed into a podcast, but we started finding like, if we add unique content that is only on that podcast, these pod numbers go up.
For sure.
And so we start doing more of that. And then it becomes like, Lou Lombardo introduces me to the Chad the Bird team, and I'm just laughing my ass off this entire time. And it turns out they like you, and they like Q101, and they know all about these things, and we have those conversations, and we end up doing a deal with them and doing the same kind of thing. And for me, it's like, and then obviously building the ones around our talent, the one that Case is doing, which it just, that kid impresses me every single second because of his growth and his want to continue growing. And that pod, I think, is helping him do that even more than just radio.
For sure.
So it becomes like, these things become mechanisms, not just for more content out there, but for also aligning with talent that makes Q101 a lot bigger than it could be just as Q101.
Totally agree. I love having Carcon Carne being part of Q101. It's my heritage.
Yeah.
Like, I love being Q101 adjacent. I think we went out to dinner a few months ago, and I think I said at the time, I would be perfectly comfortable occupying some kind of Stan Lee role with Q101, like a chairman emeritus. Like, I'm not employed by the station, but occasionally I have a cameo role. Here's my cameo with you today. I kind of like that. Like, oh, there he is again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's that's awesome because, obviously that's great for me. But, it's like everybody likes you. Everybody respects you. This pod is so good. The only X factor is if you wanted to do it, right? And so I'm very fortunate. I feel very lucky that we're able to partner with you in that way, and I hope it also demonstrates to other people that we want to partner with, like, hey, look, this is like we go all in on these pods. They're important to what we're doing as Q101, and they're every bit as important as what we post on Instagram and things like that, and those videos that we create. And they're a huge part of why we're growing our YouTube channel as significantly as we are. I remember you said to me when we started this, like, just so you know, here's the forecast for podcasting: video, audio, yep. Right? Like, or video only, audio only. And that resonated with me too, because I don't know that I necessarily would have prioritized video on a lot of these without that conversation with you. So it's helped us get better.
It's unbelievable. Like, it was night and day, and the shift happened almost overnight.
Yeah, I believe it. And then once you start seeing, you're like, and I see it all working that way, I think about that conversation with you, and I just go, oh yeah, he's right. Like, I get it. I totally get it. Because people, what I come from is I think about people consuming audio products a certain way by hitting that button right there and listening to what comes out. But it's just not that way. They do it a number of different ways. And audio to video, while maybe a completely crazy concept for us to initially get our head around, that's what YouTube really is.
Yes.
It's audio-based content that has added video so that people can consume it there, because convenience always wins, right? It's why radio will probably stay a thing for a while. It's like, at the end of the day, you can get in, you can hit the thing, and there it is.
Hit the thing.
Yep, hit the thing. So how do you maximize that convenience? How do you pay that off for people? The
interesting thing now that I'm seeing is, no surprise, short form content is way preferred. Every time I upload a full-length video episode to Facebook, I get a warning window saying, just so you know, long-form video content isn't going to be preferred moving forward. Are you sure you wouldn't rather turn this into a reel?
Yep.
And so, as I'm waiting the 30 minutes for each 30-minute episode to upload, I'm like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
If they're just going to deprioritize it, no one will see it, and I'd have better luck with a 90-second clip.
Are they doing that so that they can charge you?
I don't even think that's it. I just think they're trying to be competitive with YouTube Shorts, which are taking off, and TikTok, and the way people can. Instagram, the max length for Instagram videos, as is for Facebook Reels, is 90 seconds.
Yeah, we and actually I learned this from Kenzie. Kenzie started right around when I started here. She's on our morning show, and one of the things that she had talked about was these 30-second clips of, like, hey, look, while the morning show is going on, we should actually get a clip up, because that's how people, so we try to do a lot of that stuff now. It was a really good idea of hers. But and you start thinking about that as, like, well, how do I act as a user? And for me, it was realizing that I don't do the things that people do. I'm fortunate enough, as you are, I have a daughter, and my daughter is of a certain age. She's of a certain consumer level. She's young, hip, cool, all that other stuff. So I just started asking her how she does it. And it's all about the 30 to 90 second clips for her. Now, catch her with that, and she'll go. She'll oh, I liked that. Oh, there's a longer thing somewhere. Well, maybe I'll go get that. But we win just as much on those 90-second clips as we would with the 30 minutes, So it's like, it becomes, okay, we'll just do that then.
Yeah, I learned a while ago, I'm going to stop chasing the metrics on the long-form stuff, and just getting the brand out there. Just making it top of mind. So that,
right, and that circles back to what we were just talking about, like how, even in people meters, radio has gotten back to the roots of be a great brand, get attention.
Thank God.
Yeah. Oh, couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. I did classic rock for a while, and I still do in a different version of my life. But watching a lot of those iconic classic rock stations, which I grew up listening to that, and they were always gross and stupid and funny and offensive, and and now they're dry segs between Zeppelin and Def Leppard, and it's like, well, that's
I do love a well done dry seg, That
Oh,
said,
sure. Hey,
yeah.
look, but I don't know that our computer programs allow for the art of that.
That's just
right?
it. I miss the art.
When you could sit there with the pot,
yeah.
it's like it makes me nostalgic for that. But yes, I do love a good high deliberate dry seg. But at the end, I just love fun. And if we can just make this fun for people to be a part of, and you have to to use the phrase, skate to where the puck is, and use the things that people are using, it's just as much of a win.
I said before you got in the car, the station sounds like Q101, which I take it as the highest possible compliment.
Appreciate
like
that.
Mission accomplished. You're hitting all the right notes, musically, community-wise. It feels like the radio station.
That's awesome.
It feels like the brand that people grew up with in the 90s, people grew up with before the station went off the air in 2011. It feels like Q101.
Yeah, and it's a lot of that is as simple as just listening. It's just going, my vision is an evolving thing because my vision is built on the opinions of a lot of people, and it's the trust and expertise of a lot of people. And Janine Lombardo, and I tell her every day of like how lucky I am to have her, not just as a therapist, because she listens to me all the time, but she'll come in and she'll go like, hey, I heard X or Y on the morning show, and that's actually similar to this thing from 8-9 years ago, and it was really great and really made me, do you mind if I go tell them? I'm like, go tell them. Like, don't ask me, just go, and it's like, and they get that lift out of that. And then, and she realizes, I hope, how important that kind of thing is, and how much I appreciate that. So all of that, though, it makes me better. Selfishly, my hangs with you have made me better because I learned things that I didn't know. It helps too. Like when I'm spending a lot of time with people I admire, that's been really helpful. I mentioned XRT earlier, and I've become really good friends with Laura Duncan, and a lot of that is like, it's born out of just so much respect. It's just like, she's so good at what she does, and I listen to it and I go, I can hear it. I can hear the art of every little thing that she did, and I go, damn, because I didn't think of that, right? But I learned from it, and ultimately, it's like, man, I don't want to dictate. I want to learn. I want to apply. I want to try things. If stuff doesn't work, I want to regroup and try again. And I think that the people at Q feel that too. And that's just it's a bunch of Chicago people, right? So it's like, it's gonna sound like Chicago, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna let you go. Congratulations on what you've done. We'll be listening to Q101.
Thank you.
Not a bad first year.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the 101.1.
It just made sense. It would have been a missed opportunity. And along those lines, there's one episode I haven't recorded. It's episode 666. I've reserved that for Rob Zombie, Alice Cooper, or John Carpenter.
Or the actual devil.
Or if Satan wants to jump in. Actually, we're in a perfect location for him to jump in right here. So that one's just reserved. It's an honorary spot. But similarly, 101.1 deserves something ceremonial.
I appreciate that. I think like I said flippantly, but I meant it, which is there's a million people that you could have picked before me, but it's an opportunity for me to talk about how much I love it, how much I love every single person that's doing this with me, how much I appreciate you and some of the stuff that we're doing and where we're going with all of this. And I'll never turn down an opportunity to talk about Q101, that's for sure.
Well, and the thing is, as you know, with podcasting and in life, people love behind-the-scenes information.
Yep.
Yes, could I have grabbed Mancow or could I have grabbed Lauren? Sure.
Yeah.
But I think people are interested, especially as the brand is on an upward trajectory. Force of Habit. The radio station's on an upward trajectory. Like, how's it being done and who's doing it?
Yeah.
So I think it was really important to have this conversation.
I appreciate that.
Well, thanks, James.
Thank you.